Hello my friends, I'm making this video for you alone. So what my students when I was teaching human anatomy and physiology said, Rick, you have a way of simplifying things and making us understand. Now my motto always was understand simple concepts. Now without trying to oversimplify something, what I want to do is talk about mRNA injections and some recent research that's come out from very, very respected scientists. So for those of you who didn't know, what mRNA does is it enters the body via the injection, of course. More modern ways will be found. And it goes into the cells through the cell membrane. So here we have, I want you to think of the cell as an egg. It's not an egg, but it looks similar to an egg when you crack it open. So we'll call the shell of this egg the cell membrane. Now within the cytoplasm, which is the fluid, the white stuff in this egg, we have the nucleus, which for this purposes, I'm going to call that, we'll say that's the yolk. Visually, the nucleus is not the yolk, but visually it helps understand. So that contains all the genetic information about who you are and who your family was, and allows the cell to transcribe and grow and split and form new cells. But there are other organelles within the cytoplasm, the fluid of the cell. One being, let's say here, that's the mitochondria. That's like the battery to a cell. It produces energy in the form of adenosine triphosphate, which is what keeps us alive. And there's only about enough for 1 second of life at any given time. So the cell is constantly making ATP using oxygen and glucose. Fair enough. Also, we have a cell called the Golgi, an organelle called the Golgi apparatus, which produces vesicles and chemicals, catalysts for cellular metabolism and to keep you alive. But the important thing is with mRNA is this last one there. That's called the ribosome. Now there are other organelles, but I'm not going to get into them. The ribosome is responsible for producing proteins for building blocks for the body. It uses molecules, it stitches them together, and it produces proteins. And that's where mRNA comes in, messenger RNA. Messenger RNA, that's where it comes in. So let's think of this ribosome as a little factory. And that factory needs instructions on what to produce. So I'll put that down now. So in the mRNA injection, the messenger RNA, encoded within that injection is a series of genetic codes that tell the ribosome what proteins to make. And the theory is, well, it's not theory, it's fact. The ribosome then goes about producing the protein that it's been given the instructions to produce, in this case, the spike protein for on COVID. It doesn't produce the whole, according to them, it doesn't produce the whole disease. It just produces the spike protein, an essential part of the COVID virus, which is a very small thing, as we know. And in doing so, that spike protein leaves through the cell membrane and spreads to the body, and the body produces antibodies to that spike protein, and therefore produces antibodies that will supposedly, theoretically, or factually, as they tell you, will kill and seek and destroy COVID virus via the immune system. And that, in a nutshell, or in an eggshell, is what happens. Now, whether or not the so-called vaccine stays in your arm or goes to other cells of your body is a matter of conjecture. No matter who depends on who you speak to, but it has been found in most cells of the human body. So, in there, what I'm going to suggest to you is communication. Radio operators in the army, we used to have a little meme, and it went like this: send reinforcements, we're going to advance. Very essential message. And that would be passed on to every unit along a chain of command, maybe 10, 12 units. And it has to be passed on clearly and accurately. So if you start at 1 and go to 12, we used to do this exercise in training, on radio operators training. It was a case study. And you'd send a message across 12 people and see how it came out. Send reinforcements, we're going to advance. If it's not done properly, can come out. Send 3 and 4pence. Sorry about that. We're going to a dance. Which, of course, tactically speaking, is going to do no good at all. So, it's all about communication, and the military developed a phonetic alphabet so that these sorts of errors didn't occur. And we used to send a message, and you'd start the message by saying, hello, 1, this is 2, read back message over. And the receiving operator would say, 2, hello, 1, this is 2, send read back message over. And they knew that once they'd received the message, they had to read it back to you to make sure it was clear. And then they'd pass it on. And spelling was done with the phonetic alphabet. A, B, C, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Mike, Sierra. Sierra sounds like F, so S sounds like F, so we developed Sierra, and F was Foxtrot. M and N can sound the same, so it was Mike and November. I digress. Where are we going with this? So you send, mRNA sends a signal to the cells in your arm, into the ribosomes, to produce spike protein. Now, what has been hypothesized at the moment is a process called frame shifting, where the proteins and the letters that make up the RNA get mixed up just slightly. And instead of producing the spike protein in a normal manner, it produces an abnormal protein. So let's just say that we have our protein strand here. Let's liken it to Lego, because a very, very clever man thought of this, not me. Let's liken it to Lego. There's a strand of protein there, built by our own ribosomes, under instructions from our own bodies to produce a strand of protein. It might be a strand of ligament. It might be a strand of muscle. It might be a strand of heart tissue. It might be a strand of nervous tissue for the brain. Any one of those things it could be. But the ribosomes make it, depending on where the ribosome is located in the body or which cell. If it's a brain cell, it'll probably be producing glial cells or neurons. Anyway, that's the signal it gets, and it produces the correct protein. Now, you may have heard of mad cow disease. Mad cow disease, bovine spongiform encephalitis, and another disease called modified Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, which is the mad cow disease that is transmitted to that humans get, causes dementia, and all sorts of neurological issues. It's probably one of the most horrific diseases you could imagine. And it is caused by something that exists in nature called a prion. Now, a prion is an abnormally folded protein. So, instead of this nice straight protein with its structural components being formed, we start to get we can get a deformed protein if the wrong message is sent, or if we catch it from the environment or from other species by eating them, as in mad cow disease. It's impossible to destroy. It has to be incinerated at temperatures of exceeding 1000 degrees centigrade to an absolute ash, and even then they're not sure that if you can destroy this abnormal protein. So what happens? Send 3 and 4pence, we're going to a dance. Excuse me. Lego. This is what you get. The strand of protein, through frame shifting, gets the wrong message, and your own body starts to produce a prion. Now that's very dangerous, because look at all the deformities on this prion. They aggregate together, they catch on each other. So if the body starts to produce them or gets them from an infection, then you're in trouble, because they aggregate together and you get a cascade forming these bent, damaged proteins that aggregate together and have no functional capacity whatsoever. Those proteins are produced through a process of amyloidosis, and they're called amyloid protein. No doubt about this, amyloid protein causes Alzheimer's disease and other dementias in the brain. These are so structurally small, they can get through the blood-brain barrier. They can get through any organ's barriers from the bloodstream. You may not know this, but the brain is protected from your own blood because of the pressure and because of what diseases that might be in it. It's called blood-brain barrier. These things are so tiny, even tinier than a virus. They can cross the blood-brain barrier. And they cause the cells, and they do, in Creutzfeldt-Jakob's and bovine spongiform encephalitis, produce these abnormal proteins. No doubt about that. The ramifications for this are prions can exist in the soil for nearly 20 years. They can be absorbed into plants. They can even be, studies on American deer populations have found that can even be transmitted by an airborne vector. So the deer sniffing around on the ground can sniff these things into the nasal passages and develop amyloidosis, producing these. What do they look like? Well, in the bloodstream, they look like calamari. Amyloid proteins aggregating together in the blood vessels. We've found them. They've been found. We know that now. In the last 3 years, many cadavers have had these large clots, white calamari clots pulled from major blood vessels, the carotid arteries, the femoral arteries. They're long, they're huge, and they kill you. There is no cure for such disease, for prion disease. You can't actually destroy it once it's in the environment. Dead tissue gets into the ground. Animals secrete it when they have their young. It's found in the placenta. It can get into the water system. To this day, all the 4 million cattle that were burnt in Britain, their remains are kept in a secure facility. To this day, that's how afraid they are. Here comes the kicker. Intentionally or not, mRNA can frame shift and produce, and has done in animal studies back in the early 2000s. The whole process was given away because it was just killing too many animals. It's producing these amyloid proteins in all organs. It's producing cancers, producing inflammations, heart disease, abnormal cardiac rhythms, and damage to the Purkinje fibers and the electroconductivity circuit of the heart. Nobody wants to investigate this, but prion-like materials and amyloid materials are being found. We are looking here, if this hypothesis comes to fruition, we are looking at an absolute explosion in dementia-related conditions. And the 2 to 5 years. Look at the first thing you'll notice is behavioural changes in people. I think there's plenty of that. 2 to 5 years. It's always fatal. It's like rabies. Nobody survives it. So, the prognosis, should any of these hypotheses be even remotely true, and I'm not saying they are, I'm just suggesting to you that we are all at risk. That friend that's of yours that's had 3 or 4 vaccinations may be at risk. Maybe somebody who's had 5 or 6 vaccinations. We're talking about frame shifting. Remember I said, the more the message is passed on. So 6 injections, you've had 6 injections of the same message. It could be confused. I'm pure blood, but in that sense, but even I'm at risk, because if this prion protein builds up in the environment, it will get into the water. It will get into the food chain. Remember, nothing can destroy it. It can't be cured. The only thing they've found that can destroy it, and they're not sure about that, is total incineration. So this could be quite frightening, this new development. And this video may well be taken down. But, you know, I'm just a simple man. I'm no scientist, but my nan used to say, a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. So I've gone on and researched this. And if you want, I can send you some of the research papers I've read about this particular phenomenon. We're not going to see the end of this. People won't even realise that dementia is the onset of it. People don't realise primary, secondary, and tertiary. By the time you're in secondary dementia, it doesn't matter. In primary, you don't even notice the effects on your cognitive skills. It's when the secondary kicks in, you start to do things physically wrong. and can't remember things and trip over things and become poorly coordinated. Anybody who's seen a mad cow with bovine spongiform encephalitis will know what I mean. And by the time you're in the tertiary stage, which is end of life, you are, to all intents and purposes, not there at all. You're all that's left is your brainstem keeping you alive. So the scary thing is that we may have created an absolute monster, and we are all at risk because it can and does build up in the soil, and the soil is our life. Anyway, I did this partially to enlighten myself, to explain it, because the best way to learn something is to teach it. And to say that to my students as well. Understand simple concepts and build on that knowledge. This is for you, my friends, not for anybody else. We know what's going on. This is just another hypothesis and another possibility. All information is good information. There's no such thing as misinformation. There's no such thing as disinformation. Take it all on board and learn from it all. It's what you do with it that causes the problems. Anyway, there you go. Bozo in a berry. The world as he sees it.